Did you know you are being robbed of your birthright as an American right now as we sit here and speak? It's a fact. And the thief is your federal government in Washington, D.C., and its insidious tentacles that reach into the fabric of this entire nation. I'm going to do my level best today to educate you today on a brand new threat that frankly slipped past me, and I admit it. But it's a very real threat to farming and ranching, hunting, fishing, family time, recreation, and yes, the American way of life. Brought to my attention just this past week by one of our loyal viewers, so thank you for being so connected. I lived in Montana for a few years back in the late 80s and early 90s while going to college at Montana State University in Bozeman. I absolutely loved it. I was raised hunting and fishing and had first seen Big Sky country in 1977 while on vacation with my family. A trip that forever changed me, it did, in a very good way. I have since that time had a tremendous appreciation and love affair for the western states of America. I traveled a great many of them, not just Montana, but Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, and of course Alaska, among many more. During my college days, I was very aware of the original BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, which, think about this, controls more than 10% of our nation's land. Again, think about that. It's really a jaw-dropping amount of real estate, and it is primarily in the states I just mentioned. And it's also the target for removal from being used for anything. That's right, anything. You see, while you've been distracted by 1,000 policies designed to steal your freedom from the left, they have drawn up a plan to literally steal the ground from under your feet. All in the name of, well, you can guess, climate change and then diversity, equity, and inclusion. As the globalists just outlined over the weekend at the COP28 summit in Dubai, while they dined on smash burgers and filet mignon, and with cheeseburgers still on their breath, they are ready to root out all of the self-sustaining people in America. You know, the ones they like to call right-wingers and racists. Most likely people just like you. Let me explain, if I may. You see, hidden inside Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and Joe Biden's infrastructure bill were the beginnings of something much more sinister, and that is rethinking how all federal lands are defined and, more importantly, managed in America. And those bills outlined what the land can and, more importantly, cannot be used for going forward. You see, this past spring, the federal government, by way of the Department of the Interior, made major proposals on how the Bureau of Land Management is required to deal with land use. And this impacts hundreds of millions of acres. Let me say it again, hundreds of millions of acres here in the United States, your land. The land managed by the BLM includes ecosystems that are as diverse as red rock deserts, oceans of sagebrush, towering pine forests, expansive grasslands, and the vast areas of the Rocky Mountains, just to name a few. And every single one of these places, every single one, may be off limits to you and everyone soon and forever. Let me explain further. There are 4 major changes that have been proposed to how the BLM manages the federal land under its control. And frankly, unless there is some sort of a miracle, these changes will be implemented beginning early in 2024. First is the placement of the word conservation. It is put on equal footing with all other uses of the land in what has been called multiple use land in the past. Historically, that has included recreation, range, timber, minerals, mining, hunting, fishing, scientific, and historical, among others. But now, inserting the word conservation will trump all other land uses, every single one. Meaning they're going to lock the gate and nobody except a privileged few will ever get back inside again. Trust me, second on the list is in effect selling the land right out from under you. They hide the truth by calling the move conservation leases. Conservation leases, but radical organizations like the Sierra Club and the Center for Biological Diversity or other third-party special interest groups will have the ability to lease vast expanses of federal land and then set their own rules in pursuit of environmental justice or some other misguided idea that will put them in the position of acting, well, as God himself over that land. To be clear, A third party that does not have the best interest of the American people in mind, but rather its own environmental justice agenda, could lease our federal lands in perpetuity. And there isn't anything you can do about it. Did you hear me? There isn't anything you can do about it. In effect, creating permanent control of federal lands by a third party with a radical environmental agenda without ever getting the consent of the government because it's never gone through Congress. This is a power grab by the Department of the Interior and BLM under its radical Green New Deal agenda. It's frightening. Third on the list. Alteration is just as bad as the first two, and I would revise existing regulations and framework for establishing areas, listen to this, of critical environmental concern. Critical environmental concern, ACECs. And the new rules prioritize this effort and say goodbye to cows, goodbye to grazing, or the production of oil or exploration of natural gas. It's all part of the end run of the rule of law and your rights as citizens. And number 4, it expands the framework for making land health assessments. Land health. You can imagine what that means. And that is whatever the hell those environmental wackos want it to mean.